What is something Americans will never understand? I understand all of these things pretty well as an American. Except for cricket. Whoever answered cricket, well done. Don't really understand it. And probably never will. As an American I was ready to argue. But the cricket thing was spot on. American here. Paying to use the restroom. I make all the drinks free in Roller Coaster Tycoon. I already know about this. You'd be surprised how much you can rip off your guests in Roller Coaster Tycoon too. You can charge like $15 for a lot of rides, and guests will pay it. That in some places we can't just return things we have bought because we don't like them. I remember hearing that in America you can return makeup after you bought if you don't like it. In the UK I couldn't do that. I think some companies now have a policy that you can return stuff if it's unopened and unused, but I always thought it was crazy you can return used stuff in the US. Apparently if you return it just gets thrown out and destroyed. I bought an Apple Watch at Target and returned it unopened with the plastic wrap completely intact. The employee literally took the plastic wrap off and opened it just to make sure it was in there. Not sure if they have a way to unwrap it or what they do with it, but I'm just a bit caught off guard by that. Chatty means TT, like non-bread. I'm going to use my PIN number at the moment machine to get cash money to buy a chatty with naan bread. I encounter a lot of Americans who cannot comprehend that in a lot of places in Europe you don't need a car. I'm 30. I have no desire to drive. I don't have a license or a car. Public transport is reliable and popular, and I can get anywhere by myself. Nearest grocery store is literally 30 seconds away from my home. Everything else I'd need is in 5 million walking distance. This obviously has to do because North America has really busy building regulations and planned cities in a way that requires a car as a basic necessity, because otherwise there would be no way anyone can get anywhere. Lower uni fees bad uni. In my country, the best unis are public. You can study for zero fees. Same in Argentina. The best unis are either public or the ultra expensive ones. In fact, if you study any conventional career engineering, medicine, law or accounting in a mid-range paid university, then your title will be close to worthless because you bought it. Taking 2 or 3 weeks off work to do whatever is normal, even expected. Edit to make things clear, most what I have seen is that taking days off is quite difficult. Also, 2 or 3 weeks should not be all your time but half. Edit to I'm talking about taking 2 or 3 weeks off at once, not total PTO days. Also, PTO is also your sick days. What the actual duck? Edit 3 I'm very glad to read that my generalization was just that. However, the huge differences I read in this comment section is mind-boggling. Are y'all lying to me? Edit 4 thanks for the awards you kind strangers. 3. Edit 5 last edit. I promise. I've got some questions and comments. No, I do not think the US is a horrible place. Only love and confusion here. 3. I have 7 weeks of PTO and 10 holidays, cannot pick those days, and I do use them all. My boss sometimes panics, but that's about it. I'm still very productive. I would earn a lot more if I would go to the US. I even considered it, but there are a few things that hold me back. I do this as an American and everyone always makes comments. You take a lot of vacations. Yeah, you should too. I work to live. I don't live to work. I follow the NBA, which makes me follow American sports media. And I've heard so many dumb takes that underestimates how competitive football is. Bill Simmons saying that if Iverson had chosen to play soccer he would have been the GOAT is maybe the dumbest of them all. So my answer is, some Americans will never understand just how big football is in the rest of the world, and that being at the top of such a large talent pool gives you fantastic odds at being more talented than the top players in smaller sports globally. This is a good one. As someone who grew up playing soccer here, it has always been a struggle to have people take it seriously. That you work to live and not live to work. Sometimes you need a vacation, not just when you're super rich. I was reading a post last night and getting depressed I'd never make as much money as a software engineer. Then I remembered I've done so much traveling, backpacking, and outdoor stuff, and reminded myself that money is not the goal. As an American, I'll never understand how you all have so much time and money to travel abroad. Employers here work the hell out of you. Long hours, low pay, and negligible PTO hours. I hear in the UK even the lowest paid jobs have at least 25 days a year guaranteed under the law. The wages we get don't cover the cost of living in most states. So the idea of having money to spend on trips aside from the trip cost itself kind of baffles me. I can't speak for the free time, but in general, traveling internationally is much cheaper in areas like Europe. Even if we ditch the train and just talk flights, the whole potentially not having to cross an entire continent and ocean really shortens and cheapens the flights. Another American chiming in here to say that I think a lot of it is a space issue. My aunt lives in Switzerland and she can get to Paris in 3 hours. I drive 3 hours and I'm in Nebraska or Wyoming, but not a far away part of either of those states. If I want to go as far away as South Dakota, it takes me over 6 hours to get to the Badlands. For comparison, it takes less time to drive from London to Paris and you have to use a ferry. We just have a lot of space and no real rail system. It's expensive to travel around our own country and harder still to cross the ocean to get to Europe or Asia. Implications of war on terror. War on anything drugs. Drugs seem to have won. Alcohol. The booze won. Terror. Again it seems terror won. Whatever the duck. Reason for Vietnam. Vietnam won. There seems to be a pattern with losing wars. No wonder they spend so much on military spending. You can fight wars with nations and people, but you can't fight wars against concepts. The differences between a UK, Australian and New Zealand accent. Bring South Africa's accent into it and they'll explode. Having only 2 political parties is terrible. Oh, we understand it's terrible. We just happen to make a system where it's near impossible to move away from it. Can't vote third party in major elections because it makes it essentially a vote for a party you don't want in charge. And it's exceedingly difficult to move to a better voting system that would allow you to safely vote for a third party because people in the political position to do so have zero incentive to. If restaurants paid their employees a decent salary, there wouldn't be a necessity for giving tips. We understand this, but people will also cry, but then they'll have to pay $15 for a burger without realizing it would probably be cheaper to pay more for the food and not tip. TBF, most people crying about that don't usually tip well anyway in my experience. Edit fixed a typo. Also just basing the 15 burger off my area where a burger and fries at most sit down places is 10, 12 if you get water. Obviously, the US is big and prices range drastically. My local Applebee's is $10.99 for this pre-tip, taxes, and drink. Just as a reference. I don't understand why political parties are treated like rock bands and idols. The amount of merchandise such as MAGA hats, political yard signs, and shirts of your favorite politician's face aren't things I would see on a daily basis here in Europe. Edit, since lot of people are complaining. My answer would be many Americans don't understand that treating their politicians as celebrities and biblical figures is weird and not a thing outside of the US. Edit 2 to the people saying that this also happens outside of the US, such as Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, 1930s Germany, etc. That's not the flex you think it is. Also, there's a big difference between endorsement and idolization. Even my pet spider can tell the difference. And yes, I know it's not all Americans. Jesus. I find it strange some Americans think Europe is just one entity that is comparable to the USA. It's not. Countries are not comparable to states. The differences between Poland and Spain are far greater than those between California, Florida. That's not exclusive to Europe. Saying this as an American who've had to explain this to so many people, it's painful. Africa is not a country. It's a continent with over 50 countries. That being from a place and having ancestors from a place are not the same thing. The flip side of that is understanding that something like Italian American culture is separate and distinct from Italian culture. This is all part of hanging on to your cultural roots despite the diaspora. My genes are from Italy, but that's about it. I strongly identify with being Italian American though. The cuisine, language, behavior, they are not Italian, but they are distinct to the cultural group that made the migration. I imagine this is true of other immigrant groups, Irish, Greek, etc. That English is not the mother language of most people, and therefore it is completely normal to have an accent and make mistakes. Even US has accents. English is diverse enough to where every time English is spoken, it has an accent. And I'd say the US people also make several mistakes in English despite being their only language. Just because we pay a lot of taxes does not mean we have no freedom over our finances. Americans, so often, meaning not all, but at least the majority I've met, think that if you have to pay a lot of taxes, then you are controlled by the government and you're not able to spend the hard-earned money on anything you'd like. That's not true. Paying a lot of taxes means it goes to healthcare and education, elderly care and so much more. You won't have to pay thousands just to have a chance for a good future. And if you break an arm or birth a child, you won't be bankrupt after staying in the hospital for a few days. Not all systems are corrupted with the need to get rich. So paying more taxes mean a better life and better opportunities. Somehow, a lot who I've spoken to really don't understand that getting those perks mean paying more taxes. Getting those perks also requires a government willing to provide them. In our case, the government takes our money and repurposes it to create a shitton of weapons and bail out the god-awful decisions made by rich people. You pay taxes to get governmental services. We pay taxes to get ducked over even more by our government. We are not the same. London is not the only place in the UK. There are a ton of other places, most of which are much nicer and better than London. Same here in Czech Republic. Capital cities don't define the rest of the country. Prague is a tourist trap anyway. Edit: if you still want to visit Prague, I recommend watching Honest Guided channel link. That there isn't just Americans on Reddit or anywhere on the internet. Yikes. Reminds me of the time I read a YouTube comment that said, "Go back to your country." The exchange being totally unrelated to migration. Some genuinely believe the internet is America. Edit: I'm pretty sure the person who wrote was American, even if they didn't mention it, lol. 1/4/2021. This is 1st April. I must admit I like the Japanese system. High millimeters DD. High to low importance. Easy to sort a string. That all Africans aren't black. And how all blacks aren't African American. And all African Americans aren't black. Friend is from South Africa. White as the driven snow. Moved to the US. And now gets a kick out of confusing the duck out of people.